Hello everyone, Trophy Wine Hunter. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm doing a special review of a bottle of wine that I was given by a friend. It's a 1983 Dom Perigon. So we're gonna try it out. The friend was not a wine collector, so it's just been in their basement, no special storage. So we'll see. And this is whatever the result's gonna happen, I'm gonna still film it and we'll see what happens. Let's talk about Dom Perignon. So a couple of things. Dom Perignon is credited as the father of Champagne, but his name was actually Dom Pierre Pérignon. And so Dom is just a title that's given to the Benedictine monks. And so his actual name was Pierre Perignon, but he was given the title Dom Perignon. Dom Pierre Perignon actually lived in the 17th century, and he took care of the cellars in the Benedictine monastery at Hautvillers, and actually Dom Perignon still owns those cellars today. Most people don't actually realize that it was Dom's job to try and keep the bubbles out of air. So first misconception is that he was the inventor of champagne. In fact, champagne was discovered in England about 30 years prior to Dom Perignon kind of taking over the cellars or being the cellar master at the monastery. And that's because, in fact, at that time, English glass was stronger than French glass. And so they were able to kind of have this fizzy wine, whereas the French could never produce that, because if they had any fizzy wine, it would just explode the bottles, because French bottles were not as strong as English bottles. So Dom Perignon was asked to kind of solve this problem, because they found in the cellars that their bottles were exploding. So the monastery would ferment their wines in the winter time and then store them. But they found out that sometimes when it came to the summertime, all these bottles would explode. And what we know now is that it's because when it became summer, the bottles were heated, and then the yeast inside the bottles or inside the wine or alcohol fermented again, which is the secondary fermentation, and basically created carbon dioxide and just blew out the bottles. So Dom Perignon did not invent champagne, but he did a lot of things that were really good for winemaking and the winemaking process in Champagne. Namely, he invented a press that allowed them to press the grapes so that they could extract out the white grape or white wine from dark colored skin grapes, which creates white wine, which is the precursor to Champagne. He also was the person that put cork with a stopper so that it wouldn't explode, so the bottle wouldn't explode. And he also used correctly British glass, which was stronger, to be able to withstand the carbon dioxide in fizzy wine. He also invented the méthode champenoise, which is how they control secondary fermentation with champagne to this day. Dom Perignon, although he's credited with inventing champagne, at that time, what they were making in the Champagne region wasn't what we would consider champagne. It was mostly red wine, and with his innovations, basically white wine. The popularization of champagne didn't happen until about 100 years after his death. And what happened is people that he trained in the monastery, the monks, then credited him with that invention. I gave him credit for all the methods that they were it was passed down to them and they were using. And so it only got popular in the mid-1700s in England as a drink. And so that was when really champagne was in style. The other interesting thing about Dom Perignon is it wasn't even created as a label by Moet Chandon until 1921, and it wasn't released commercially until 1936. So even though Dom Perignon lived in the 17th century, they kind of used his legacy to make the wine. So Dom Perignon is actually a creation of the 20th century. So until 1943, it was actually just regular Moet and Chandon wine that was extended aged. And then after that, after the war in 1947, they actually decided to create a different, separate batch for Dom Perignon. So it's not the same thing as Moet and Chandon champagne that's just been aged. Dom Perignon is always a vintage champagne and is only released in great vintages. So it's not released in every year. It's also typically aged 8 to 10 years before release. So the current vintage that we have is 2012. Dom Perignon is typically a blend of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay grapes, generally 50% of each. And so we are going to try the 1983 vintage, which at that time was a stunning vintage. Generally speaking, they don't suggest that you age Dom Perignon for this long, but let's see what happens. You never know. We might get lucky. We might not have a bad bottle, but we'll see. So what do we mean by a bad bottle? There's a couple of things that we look for. We look for the absence of fizz or bubbles. Even old aged champagne will have some bubbles, maybe not as effervescent as new vintage champagnes. You look for a vinegar smell or some faded fruit. You look for a sour or flat aftertaste, and then you look for cloudy appearance. So those are the type of things that we want to see and address, and we'll see what happens. So this is the bottle out of the box, and it looked good other than the fill wasn't a little bit high, so I was a little concerned. This is the packaging. It's kind of old school. Look at the lettering. It's quite old school. And then even the box is, compared to nowadays box, is quite humble, but you know, it's nice. Now we go to the cork, and the cork here is obviously doesn't have any elasticity left. But it looks okay. It looks like it's kind of a little bit chopped off with the acidity of the champagne, perhaps. Very simple. But if you look at the actual wine, that's color, it's got no fizz, but it's not cloudy. So we were very enthusiastic about it. Looked like the right color to us for 83 champagne. So we were kind of looking forward to drinking it. I must have been a little bit inebriated because I did this tasting in the middle of dinner, and obviously I forgot to turn on my mic, so that's why I'm dubbing over this. Having said that, it probably is a good idea because we're having a great time and there's a lot of noise coming out of my kitchen, and so I was kind of shouting over that. So anyways, this is probably better. So in this tasting, the mistake I made was that I didn't trust the wine, and this is my first experience with 83 Dom, and so I should have trusted the quality. But you know, we opened it, and I actually put it in the fridge for a couple hours, like 3 hours, and then we opened it. We popped it open. My initial notes were dried apricots, some yeastiness with some caramel on the aroma, orange peel, and tangy apricot on the palate. We were very satisfied with it. It definitely wasn't ruined because the color was good and it was clear. So we were very happy with that bottle. But as we started to eat through dinner, and I must have at some point taken the champagne out of the fridge, we noticed actually it got better and it got a little bit more heavy. The acidic elements kind of lessened, and you got more dried apple, almost a vanilla type cream caramel type taste, and some nuttiness. So it got better, and I think the mistake I made was to treat this again like a young champagne. I should have treated this more like a white Burgundy, an old white Burgundy, and served it more at room temperature. So if I had another bottle again, I probably would next time basically take it out of the fridge an hour before serving and just allow it to just breathe and warm up at room temperature. It probably would have done better. My initial assessment of this wine was about 90 points, but I think I served it wrong, and so if I had served it correctly at the end of the night, it'd be closer probably to 93 points. It is probably at its plateau right now, so you should drink it. I think it's still probably at its plateau, or maybe just starting to decline. It probably is its best days are over, so there's really no need to really store this wine any longer. So I had a great tasting. It was a great experience. Again, it's just, you have to have experience with bottles and see how they taste. Hope you enjoyed this. Until next time, happy drinking.